It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Great quote. I want to talk about the fact that writing is freaking hard, not only in a craft sense, not only in the sense of it's a really difficult skill and something that you need to work towards, and there's so much learning to do about it, but also in the sense of it is a constant game of perseverance in the face of discouragement. I know people talk a lot about, like the thralls of publishing in the publishing industry. But before you even get to that, when you're actually in the writing process, when you are drafting a book or revising a book, you are kind of in the thralls of a complete storm, a hurricane, if you will. I think that writing can be fun, and it should be fun, and you should enjoy yourself throughout the writing process. And it is possible to take it too seriously and to overfixate and overthink. I do strongly believe that. But I also think that if this is something that you want to pursue seriously and do well, there is a challenging element to it. And to pretend that that doesn't exist I think it does a disservice in a sense to yourself. It minimizes what you're doing, because I think knowing that you're doing something hard and incredibly challenging and that takes so much brain power and is really a feat can actually instill a lot of confidence. I think there's a reason why content on authortube that talks about the struggles of writing is so popular. And I think it's because people need to be seen when they're in the trenches of that moment. I feel like this is the video that maybe I needed a week or two ago when I was really going through it creatively, mentally. I'm hoping this can serve as a little bit of encouragement for you, but I'm also hoping you can just feel seen and heard in your struggles with the writing process, because despite how many times I've heard other writers express that they've gone through this and that it's a normal part of the process, every time I'm faced with self-doubt or insecurity about my writing, or I'm just struggling in the writing process, I convince myself that I'm the only one who feels this way and that this is just a me problem. I feel like in the drafting phase of this process, when I was working on the first draft of this book, and it was my first time writing a book in years, I was so swept up by the excitement, that sort of like beginner's high where like I was so excited and proud of what I was doing. I'd never written a book before, so that in itself felt like a massive accomplishment, and I was kind of riding on the coattails of that. I feel like I successfully was able to keep any sort of self-doubt at bay. I kind of charged through that first draft, and fun, pretty lighthearted process. And the extreme positivity about that drafting process that I expressed in my videos was genuine, because that really was how I felt during the writing process. And then draft 2 happened. And listen, draft 2 was inarguably much more challenging for me creatively than the first draft, but it was also so much more rewarding. I haven't even finished draft 2 quite yet, and I already feel a much deeper sense of accomplishment than I did finishing the first book. And I think that ties into like the quote that I kicked this video off of, and the message that like something being difficult, something being really challenging and like pushing you to the brink of what you're capable of and forcing you to get better to meet it with the level of expertise that it requires of you, having something that really pushes you past what you thought maybe you were capable of and forces you to bring something out of yourself that maybe you weren't sure was there. That type of like intense creative challenge is actually really freaking cool. And that's where so much growth is too. Don't get me wrong. I think that when you're working from a place of ease and trusting yourself, it can result in really good results. And I've always said like, I'm someone who creates my best work when I'm coming from a secure, stable place. So that is 100% true for me. I don't work well under pressure. Like that's just never been where I shine. I feel like I need a more relaxed, trusting environment to do my best work. But that doesn't mean that the process can't be challenging or difficult brain work. Just because I want to be approaching my work from a trusting, healthy place doesn't mean that it won't still be hard work sometimes. And I think especially with something like a novel, where it's such a large scale project, you can't expect it to feel good all the time. And this is something that I feel like my friend Alyssa in the books does a really good job of expressing and normalizing in her content is you're gonna hit roadblocks. Like with a project of this scale, where not only does it span potentially years, but you're working on thousands of words, multiple drafts. I think if it all feels easy and if it never feels like challenging brain work, maybe you're missing that level up. Maybe you're not cracking that next level of the book, you know? I think I had to come to a moment during the revision process. I kind of saw a crossroads of like, do I accept my current capability, the current version of this book? Do I just polish what I kind of spit out in draft 1? Or do I rise to the occasion? Do I try to learn more, push myself, come up with new ideas, creative problem solve, and give this book the potential overhaul and deep work and rewriting that it needs to reach its fullest potential? And I'm really glad that I chose that more challenging route. Yes, it made for an 8-month revision process on draft 2, and that is no joke. That is longer than it took me on draft 1. But I think if I had half-assed it, frankly, if I had just thrown some gloss on draft 1 and called it a book, you know, I don't think I would have the deep-seated pride that I feel now. And I really feel like I kind of pushed myself to perform or to write at a level that I wasn't necessarily quite ready for. And I think I benefited a lot from that. I think it's also encouraged me to go seek more knowledge and to continue trying to level up my writing skill. And that cannot be understated as a benefit, you know? I had to deal in the past couple weeks with some low lows. I don't want to minimize the emotional side of this because while I think it's important to have a continuous thirst to improve yourself and to embrace the difficulty of the writing process and all of that, I do think it veers into toxic when it turns into you beating yourself up because I want to improve as a writer. I don't want to hate myself through that process. You know what I mean? Like I want to improve as a writer because I love myself enough to want to get better and to want to keep creating more and more meaningful and strong art, not because I'm coming at it from a place of self-loathing. And this is, I think, a critical distinction because I'm always going to encourage like positive self-talk and believing that you can improve, believing that you can write a good book. Like if you don't have that self-belief and that sense of like, I could do this, you're never going to get through the process, right? So I want to make that important distinction because I want to steer clear of the negative self-talk. And there was a moment in the past couple weeks that got a little more just mean to myself. And that's not what I'm trying to accept or be okay with because there's a big difference in my mind between being mean to myself and accepting, hey, I'm still a beginner at this thing. I'm going to put in the freaking work to try and make this book as good as possible. I'm going to do what I can to learn more. I'm going to keep striving to improve. Like there's a difference between being dissatisfied with like the level of work that you're capable of and wanting to up level and continue to grow and being mean to yourself. I don't think being mean to yourself is constructive. That's not going to help you grow. So I'm trying to land on the healthy side of that spectrum and allow myself to view this book as a challenging project because it freaking is. And to say otherwise would be lying to myself, but also to trust that I can freaking do it. And anything I don't know or don't feel equipped for, I can go out and seek that knowledge. And I'm going to do everything I can to make this book as good as it can be. And when I look back at this moment or this process in a year or a year and a half, when the book is finally done and polished and ready to go, I'm going to feel such a deeper pride from the fact that I was painstaking about it and I really did put in the work. I want to speak to anyone who's maybe feeling the way that I felt a week or two ago and first of all, validate the fact that doubting yourself in a creative process and especially something as daunting as writing a novel is very normal. And I want you to know and remember that that's normal and that it's almost a universal experience amongst writers. It is very uncomfortable to be a beginner at something or to just not be at the skill level of what you want to be. You know, it's uncomfortable to admire writers who you know are years or many steps ahead of you. I feel like I've been saying a lot lately that I wish that I had been writing for the last several years so that I could stand on more firm footing now. But I've taken a lot of breaks throughout my wider writing journey. You know, I did write as an adolescent and I'm glad that I did. And I think that that gave me a foundation. But my writing as an adult was spottier and not a consistent practice whatsoever. And I need to be okay with that. Like I need to accept the fact that I am a beginner at this thing and not pretend to be anything but that. Try to learn from people who are more experienced than me. Own where I'm at in my writing journey because I think there's a power in acknowledging and owning the fact that you're a beginner at something without using it in any sort of self-deprecating way. But I will own the fact that I'm still new at this and there's a lot for me to learn. And I know that. And I think that level of like humbleness in the face of a craft that you're kind of just dipping your toe into is important. And it keeps you in, I think, a good sweet spot to know, okay, I'm only going to get better at this if I practice. So I'm going to keep going. But I'm also accepting the fact that I'm still a beginner writer and this book is not going to be, my best work. And it's going to take a lot of time and effort and energy and learning to get this book to a place that I'm proud of and willing to share with the world, especially because this is a first book, I think reworking the beginning of this book has been one of the most gratifying moments of this writing process because I did hit that rock bottom low of like, I don't know how I'm going to fix this. And then I overcame that and I saw myself see a challenge, problem solve that challenge, come to some sort of conclusion, figure out a solution, and actually implement it. I saw myself go through that full cycle of like problem identification, problem solving, like actually getting in there and being like, I don't know how to make this work. Let's make this work. Coming to a good conclusion, coming to a good result, and being really freaking proud of that result and being willing to share it with other people because I thought it was pretty decent. Watching myself go through that entire trajectory and that entire life cycle in real time in a relatively short period of time because it was just one section of the book. I think that same sort of flow is what's really happening with the book, but it's happening on such a wide scale that you can't see the forest from the trees. I think with a book, you have to sit in that dip of like the trenches, the part where the book feels a little like rough, especially if you're a bit of a slower writer or maybe you don't have a ton of time in your life to write. You have to sit in that dip for a long time, like longer than you would with most shorter creative projects. And so you're forced to like kind of say hey to all of those feelings that come with being in that lower dip point of the process. You have to be comfortable sitting in that of like, I don't exactly know what I'm doing. I don't know if this is going to come together. Like I have a lot of doubts about how I wrote this thing. You have to sit with that, and you have to get okay with feeling that way sometimes about your work. And it's an adjustment. I want to just take a moment to like praise you for a second. Because if you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you're writing a book. And I think it's so important to give yourself a reality check sometimes of like, wow, I am quite literally writing a novel. Like that's crazy. That's a crazy endeavor to do. And you deserve to feel proud of yourself for doing that. Writing a book is an act of bravery. You are allowing yourself to be seen trying to create something good. And that is an incredibly vulnerable and stressful place to put yourself in. And I just want to remind you that because if you are struggling with any sort of doubts, know that I personally am still really freaking proud of you for trying because so many people never start for this exact reason because it's hard, because you have to go through the negatives as well as the positives. You're not going to be winning all the time. You're not going to be on the top of the mountain and the accomplishment all the time. In fact, you're going to spend a lot of time in kind of the trenches before you get there. And I love the way that this quote puts it, actually. If you are in that arena, if you are getting freaking knocked in the face and like you're bleeding and bruised and bloody, whatever, you deserve so much credit for the fact that you are willing to put yourself in that position and willing to, as the quote says, dare greatly, put yourself out there, go for something. Even if it might mean getting your ego knocked, even if it might mean getting a little bruised and battered in the process, you're willing to go through that. And that is impressive. And like it says as well, best case scenario, you get to experience a really hard-won achievement. You get to reach the end of this process and be like, holy shiz. I quite literally spent months, maybe even years of my life making this thing. I wrote thousands upon thousands of words. I gave it the time and energy. I dedicated hundreds, if not thousands of hours to this project. That is insane, actually. And best case scenario, you get to experience the feeling of like, wow, I actually created something really good and I'm really proud of it. Other people are enjoying it. You might get some accomplishments, whether that's publishing your book, whether that's self-publishing or trad publishing, or even just like getting it to a place where you're really happy with it. That's the best case scenario. It's like you finally get to publish this book and it gets warmly received and people can tell you put time and love into it. And that's great. On the other side of the spectrum, if you fail, if you end up with a book that you're like, yeah, this is just not up to par, maybe my next book will be, but this book is not doing everything that I want it to do. It's not up to the standard that I want it to be. At least you failed trying, at least you were out there doing the thing. You were in the freaking arena, throwing punches, knocking over challenges, like defeating bosses, Like, you should still be freaking proud of that, regardless of the outcome of your book. And I don't think there is any real failure if you're trying. Like, truly, if someone wants to write a book and they write a really bad book, but they showed up and they got 60,000 words on the page, I'm going to still be much more impressed with that person than I am with the person who never picked up the pencil because they were too scared. And that's not to shame anyone who hasn't like started yet. You know, maybe this is a goal of yours and you just haven't like taken that plunge. I'm not trying to like rag on you, but I am saying the act of starting, the act of being seen, trying to do something creative and trying to make something good is in itself a feat, and it's something to be proud of in itself, because there's an additional level of vulnerability, not only to trying to create something, but to admitting that you're trying to make it good and that you want it to be well written or well executed. And I think as I've gotten further in this process and I've kind of acknowledged and accepted that, like, oh, I do actually want this book to be pretty well written. Like, I would actually like this book to be pretty airtight and not have a ton of issues and to just be like decently strong, you know, that adds pressure. It really does, because it's like, oh, now everyone knows I'm actually trying to like make this thing good. Like, that's a lot more pressure than just saying, oh, I'm just writing a book, but like, I don't really care if it's good. Like, it's just for fun. Like, it's just for myself. That's like low-key a little less stressful than straight up admitting like, no, I'm going to actually try to do my best and I'm going to try to make it as good as I physically can make it, because there's an admittance inherent in that you are giving it your best and what people see is going to be the best that you are capable of. And they might pass a judgment on you as a writer based on that product. And that can be really intimidating. But I guess kind of the thesis statement of this video is like, strive to be better, strive to improve yourself, push yourself, challenge yourself, fully embrace the challenges and the thralls that come with writing a book, but you deserve to be kind to yourself throughout that growth process as much as physically possible. You know, we're all going to have moments where we get a little negative towards ourselves, unless you're just like abundantly, insanely confident, which I love that for you. But I'm more so speaking to someone who maybe feels like me, where I feel like I am kind of always been a very insecure person and I struggle a lot with like confidence and stuff. Like, it can veer into negative self-talk pretty easily for me. I guess I want to encourage you to try to be kinder to yourself when you are experiencing that self-doubt, and know that just because you're struggling with the book, or maybe like you're not quite where you want to be in terms of writing as a skill, doesn't mean that you can't get there, and doesn't mean that you should be mean to yourself throughout that process, you know? You deserve to be kind to yourself, and you deserve to celebrate the fact that you are doing a hard thing. And I think the fact that you're finding writing to be difficult doesn't suggest that you're inadequate or incapable or any of the mean things that you might be thinking about yourself. I think it actually suggests that you have a high standard for yourself because you want to make this book good, and that is great, you know? The fact that you can identify weaknesses in your own writing actually means that you're more likely to seek out the resources and the amount of practice and the knowledge that you need to become a better and better writer, and that's a good thing. I don't think dissatisfaction with your work is a negative thing. I think it can actually be a great prompter for growth and for continuous self-improvement. You know, the moments where I've improved the most that I can look back on and see as like big growth moments in any creative field were the moments where I saw something in my work that I was not fully happy with. Maybe I got a little frustrated. Maybe it turned into a bit of a negative thing towards myself for a second. But then my own stubbornness and my own like desire to get better propelled me to seek out what I needed to get to that next level, instead of staying in that place of just like feeling bad about it. You know, the best thing you can do for your own writing doubts and for your own like writing insecurities, I think, is one, to try and speak kindly to yourself, because I do think that's important. But two, to try and get better, you know? If you are feeling bad about your work, I think it can actually be a cue that you're capable of more and that your taste has outgrown your current skill level, and that can be a good thing. I'm going to be going into draft 3 of this book pretty soon. You know, I'm pretty close to finishing draft 2, and the attitude that I want to take into draft 3 is like a let's kick some freaking butt attitude. Because I think going into draft 2, I was kind of like very leisurely about it. I was like, okay, we're just gonna see what happens. I'm just gonna write when I feel like it and be really gentle about the process. No. I want to be bold about the way that I enter into this draft. I want to enter into this draft knowing that it's going to kick my butt and being okay with that and being ready to kick its butt back. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to try to like create problems where there aren't any or overwork it or overthink it. If I look at a scene and I'm like, I'm really happy with that, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but I am going to go into it like ready and strapped to freaking fight my way through it. And I hope that that will actually allow me to charge through the draft with a sense of momentum, determination, and just like sheer force of will that I didn't really have entering into draft 2. And frankly, that's probably a big part of why draft 2 took so freaking long, is because genuinely I was just not ready for the level of like rigor and like mental challenge and just like showing up that I'm ready to bring to draft 3. I feel like this is just me like ready for like a battle cry. Like to me, that is the reaction that came from that low point and that moment of doubt and like discouragement, is this sense of like, okay, let's freaking go. Rest assured, if you are currently in like one of those lulls and one of those moments, that you can come out of that with a sense of like renewed energy and determination of like, okay, I got knocked down for a second there. I got punched in the jaw. I'm going to retaliate. Like I'm getting my ass back up and I'm going to keep going. Succeeding at anything is truly just an exercise in tenacity and repeated, almost relentless refusal to stay down. And that's not to say that there won't be times where writing can and should feel easy. Like I want to make it clear that my whole message is not like writing is a struggle, because I think sometimes if I get too in that writing is a struggle mindset, like I can really shut myself off from things flowing more freely. Sometimes I would love for it to feel free flowing and for it to come out naturally. And sometimes it does, sometimes it does feel magical in that way. Sometimes it feels like a scene flows from my fingertips, but other times a scene kind of takes a bit of like wrestling to work, or like a chapter or a section of the book takes a bit of wrestling to work. And just because it did doesn't necessarily mean that I can't still get to a product that I'm really happy with and feel really accomplished for doing so. You cannot have the moments where it feels free flowing and like magic without also having those darker moments. It's like the yin and yang of everything, like it's impossible to experience those rushes of exhilaration where things are clicking together and all the pieces are coming together without also having moments where it's not working or you're struggling and you need to figure out like some sort of solution. If you got to the end of this video, comment down below, yay for doing hard things. Yeah, comment yay for doing hard things. I think that's sweet. If you have a book that you would like me to critique, I do offer manuscript critique services. All the information for that will be down in the description. And I do have a Patreon page where there's now 4 pieces of bonus content, including a recent Patreon exclusive vlog where I chatted all about character art, brainstorming for character art. So feel free to check that out as well. It's only $5 to join the Iced Latte tier. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, happy writing. Also, you can do this and I'm so proud of you. And I'm cheering for you, even if it feels like no one else is. I'm proud of you. I love you. Okay, bye.